Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the NFT. My name is Sinful, and I am your host for tonight's show. I am very happy and honored to see you all here at Meta One Designs headquarters once again on another Monday night. Like, wow, thank you everyone for joining us here. Big shout outs to Zom and Toria. I see you right there on the right of on the left of the screen. We got CK Bubbles in her bubble martini, just chilling. Multi NFT just popped in. Face Moon right behind me. We have Match. We got Mary Shark on the rise in the house. The lovely T Bird. We have Rishi Girl, DCL 369. I don't think I've seen your wallet here before, but welcome to Beyond the NFT. Mosquita, don't worry, I see you back there, and I think that is DJ Trex in the building. Oh, Stony Eyes going up and down, and I think I saw Mr. J Stickles somewhere just chilling. He usually likes to chill above everyone's head, make sure everyone checks out. We got Bitfiend in the building, Derek rocking his muse, and of course, Make an NFT in the house. Welcome everyone. Thank you. And yeah, just real quick, a word from our sponsors. Make sure to check out Bucktown MMA. Bucktown empowers the youth through the discipline of strength. Yeah, I'm sorry, I fucked that up. Wow. Through the discipline and strength of mixed martial arts, they offer a no-cost training program and get kids out of the streets and into a gym, doing something better than than what you could do out there. So thank you, Bucktown. Thank you for sponsoring the show tonight, and thank you for reaching out. It is an honor to be sponsored by you. And now that we got that out of the way, tonight's tonight's guest is a seasoned digital artist whose work has garnered attention on digital platforms. Now, that was the first sentence of his bio, and that one sentence alone is enough to just build up my excitement and get me ready for tonight's show. Get all the questions started. So instead of me just continuing reading along, I'm gonna pass it to the man himself. It is a pleasure to welcome Match Zimmerman to the stage. Check, check, Match. Oh, looks like we lost Match. I don't hear him. Let's see. Let's do a check on him here.
What up? What up? You can hear me all right?
All right, now I hear you. Now I hear you. What's up, Match? Can you hear me, Match?
Yeah, hold on. I'm here. I'm here. Hold up.
All right, well, I guess while we wait a little bit, we look around the room here. Gaia Crypto has joined us tonight. We we have Chloe over here, right next to Toxic Waifu. We have Metal Wolf in the building, just chilling. Oh yeah, and here's Mr. J Stickle. I was looking for Mr. J Stick. Welcome, welcome. I'm welcoming Mr. J Stickle to his own house. That is what Mew is doing here. We have old guy in the house. We got DJ Trex just chilling in the back, enjoying the show. Hopefully. Kai has joined us this evening. Multi NFT looking fly. Looking fly. I promise everyone we did sound check. It's just the metaverse just trying to kick us down. But don't worry, we'll get back up and running here shortly. Match, I see you're
All right.
back. Welcome,
I'm
welcome.
I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, that was weird, dude. It was like only popping up, and it was showing up like 30 seconds later in my in-world sound in Decentraland, but it was working before. So I logged out, but now I'm back, baby.
Now we back, baby. Yeah, with your introduction, I read like pretty much the first sentence of your bio, and just like instantly, you just, very exciting, got my excitement up. So, I'm just gonna pass it over to you because I'm sure
Yeah.
I did your intro no justice. So I'm gonna pass it over to you so you could give yourself a proper introduction and say hello to anyone that you may see in world.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm so psyched to be a part of this. I appreciate you asking me to talk tonight and come out and hang out because this is one of the events that pops up for me all the time. And I'm like, dude, I got to get in there. And sometimes I'll see clips or watch some replay stuff, and I'm just like, oh man, there's always super interesting conversations happening. So, um, as I've been diving deeper and deeper into this scene, I've been really looking at this as kind of a hallmark of a landmark maybe for the community, and just some cool discussions and stuff. So I'm honored to be part of it. And when I look out in world and stuff, I was looking at the list of people here. I mean, it's like DCL royalty, man. So it's super humbling to be here and to chat a little bit. I heard the intro. I think, I leave the line of the bio sort of purposely vague, in terms of being a digital artist working in with emerging media and garnering attention. That feels ambiguous enough because it's that might be my mom and dad and my kids and my wife, or sometimes it's larger institutions that do it. So for me, I'm just like really what I think of as an artist who's just curious about exploring emerging media, whether that's Web3 or graphic design and motion graphics, and seeing how analog and digital sort of creative processes come together in order to make something interesting that transcends the medium on some level. So it isn't just about the medium itself that's being used, it's about the ultimate goal or the story that's trying to be told, or maybe the community you're trying to connect with. So that's kind of why I leave that vague, because I'm multidisciplinary. I put the idea first, like so many people do, and then I just explore how to make that idea sort of come to life, and sometimes that means hopping around and trying different stuff, and then even going back to like old school, cassette tape technology and stuff. Whatever's most appropriate, then I'll embrace it.
That's awesome. And how long have you been an artist?
Yeah, dude. So on April 2nd, it was my 40th birthday. So I'm pretty psyched to still be going after it on the art stuff for so long. But I've always made art on some level, like as early as like elementary school and that kind of thing. But really started getting serious late in high school, and then into college when I was a double major with new media art and studio art. So that was, again, kind of similar to what my little intro. I wanted to have a good understanding of traditional media as well as new emerging media, and my concentrations were in the studio art side of things. That was photography, and so I did black and white darkroom photography as well as digital photography and that. And then video art was my concentration on the kind of new media side of things. And so really just kind of from there, found ways to, I've always worked for places where I can kind of manipulate that skill set to apply it to some sort of larger industry, because that's where I was able to like make money and get insurance and that kind of stuff, as I think a lot of us could probably relate. And the whole time I was just creating my own work. I've always been creating my own work, and have never had really have never had the ability to stop doing it. I think that like impulse to make the work is something that has made it kind of just easier. I never feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm working hard to try and get motivated to make new work. Um, but yeah, I think early on, after school, I got lucky with a couple opportunities, and um, I had a video art piece shown at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and that was kind of out of nowhere, and it that was for me, it was like a pretty big eye opener in terms of what online, like hosting and posting your stuff online can do. Because ultimately, what happened there was I was just working on a bunch of experiments for a new project, and when I posted this like abstract video piece, it was maybe like 55 seconds or something. It was on there for a while, and then it was on Vimeo or whatever. And I got a message on Vimeo one day and it said like from MoMA, and I was like, that's got to be like someone named MoMA, right? It's not the actual Museum of Modern Art. So, but then it turned out to be legit, and they had found this like experiment that I did that fit into this show that they were doing with a bunch of abstract video art pieces that were just these kind of endless loops. And similar, ironically, coincidentally, what it was actually a really similar kind of setup to what we see here in these spaces in Decentraland, where there's like a live DJ and there's a bunch of monitors everywhere and there's video art and it's immersive and there's people connecting. So that for me, more so than the like accolades of having that, I mean, it's nice to put it on the resume, but the biggest thing for me was what I learned about process there was that we worked so hard to perfect our final output, but the truth is the interesting stuff might actually be some of the artifacts of the exploration during the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, and then just making art since then. So I like graduated college in 2006 and have just been working professionally at doing graphic design and video editing. And then I was a teacher for 15 years, teaching digital media and innovation and all kinds of emerging media and technology stuff. I was a department chair at a high school, and also teach at Loyola University. I teach a few graduate courses there in their school of education related to like art and design and that kind of stuff. So just this to kind of bring it up to where I am now, in the last 2 or 3 years, I left education full time and started my own creative agency where I work with this kind of organic team that changes from project to project. But I just pull in people that I know to work on different projects with me for clients, and we do branding and identity and a bunch of social media stuff, content creation, but usually it's more strategy based than being the ones that are making the actual content. Yeah, and then like podcast production, all those kind of things to just help brands kind of tell their story, reach the audience they want to reach, and use some emerging media as like I say that phrase a ton because it's the phrase I use with clients, and because a lot of times they don't know what to call stuff. And I said, well, there's always going to be a media that's emerging, so just call it emerging media, and you'll be on the cutting edge, right? So I always work with people to kind of just understand some basic terms. And lately, a ton of stuff has come in with like consulting in terms of like AI and what that's going to do, and what they should be worried about and what they shouldn't be worried about. And I think all of that, more and more, I just try to work towards having my creative process and then my kind of like work process. I just keep working harder and harder to get kind of aligned, so they get closer and closer. It doesn't feel like an on and off switch. It feels more like it's just how I'm approaching all the work.
Yep. That's awesome. And I want to start with happy birthday. You mentioned April 2nd. That was about 6 days ago, your birthday. So I didn't get to wish you a happy birthday. So here it is, my friend. And
Appreciate it.
And I hope to be able to tell you happy birthday for many years to come.
Yes, thank you.
And so you mentioned you kind of have been an artist like pretty much all your life, but didn't start working as as a artist till like after college, you would say, like 2006. So 18 years, would that be accurate
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
doing it professionally?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, there's always like gigs that come through in college where you're designing. I mean, like you could argue that like from middle school on when I was recording music with bands and
Mhm.
designing the album covers, and at that point it was literally like drawing on cassette sleeves. But that like that was kind of the start of the career of thinking of like an external audience other than just my art for my own sake. But yeah, yeah, professionally it would be like, yeah, from 2006. So yeah, coming up on 20 years of having art at the core, and creativity and the creative process at the core of whatever I'm doing professionally and creatively.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, like, I mean, 18 years is a lot of time. That is a lot of, yeah, a lot of time to build that experience. I keep reading, like, in multiple places where they say if you dedicate yourself to a craft at least 1 hour a day for the next 5 years, you are automatically an expert. But you have about 18 years here, and I
Yeah.
bet more than just 1 hour a day here.
Yeah, no, I think it's something that's interesting to reflect like at any point in anyone's career, like you hit these times and you reflect, and sometimes that's because like there's a big event or it lines up with a birthday or whatever. And
Mhm.
um you know for me, having this Decentraland thing happen, with the art week build, that was so huge because it was like a really great point for me to look back and to look at, here's like new cutting edge sort of interesting creative work that's being created here. Like in my opinion, the stuff that I'm seeing in Decentraland and other metaverses and other virtual social network things too, I guess, but especially in Decentraland, from my experience, there's just there's just actually interesting art happening that is not about just, art about Decentraland. A lot of time these like Web3 scenes, they're just making art about themselves and
Mhm.
about itself, and I think it's important to be like self-referential, but I also think like you need to be able to have the work stand on its own outside of, just the community. And I think Decentraland does that, right? And I know that I do that. I know it does that because for me and like my sort of IRL artist community and people that I know who aren't on chain and aren't in Decentraland and other stuff, I'm showing them this work and they're just applying off-chain analysis to it in terms of like critique or whatever, and it fully holds up, right? So I think, for me, looking at this opportunity and it being my 40th and looking back at moving away from moving away from teaching, and moving and working for someone and going out on my own and working, it's been like a really cool couple of years, and this right now is like great timing, for me to just reflect and be psyched about the fact that, when I left college, I didn't know if it was like feasible to continue with art and how you do it and all that. And there's been many times like where that's, I think a lot of people deal with that, because we don't really have a larger system
Mhm.
globally even that is like where you can just be making art on your own all the time, unless you're getting lucky or you've had some great opportunities come through.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that hour a day thing, I think is super important. I used to say this to my students all the time, and I do with my graduate students now. But um, ultimately, like if if putting in an hour of time a day really isn't that bad if you're super curious or interested in something, or you want to work on something or refine something or learn something new, the hard part is actually finding that thing, right? And I think um, sometimes we can even like confuse ourselves by thinking like, oh, that's the thing I want to do. We see someone doing something that we
Mhm.
like and we're like, that's the kind of thing I want to do, and then we try to do it and it's either like difficult or it's just not really resonating with
Mhm.
how our mind works or whatever. And sometimes we like blindly stick to it and they're like, well, maybe if I put in some more time, but it never works out unless it like is resonating with your curiosity. So for me, that's like the the big thing. I think like an arbitrary like assignment to work for an hour every day, if it's not something you're actually curious about and willing to grind on and can get lost in,
Mhm.
um, then you're probably wasting time, right? Like I fully believe in developing technique and fundamentals and all that kind of stuff and foundational skills. I think they constantly need to be reworked and sort of continually honed. But it really isn't going to happen unless you're curious about what you're doing. And to me, the two big things are like our curiosity and confidence. And like that confidence comes
Mhm.
from all the work you've put in by chasing your curiosity, right? So like if you're curious about something, eventually that's actually going to turn into confidence. And I think just because you've been around it a lot, or you understand it, or you start to see patterns and systems at play, and then you start to become confident in it. So now you're pairing confidence and curiosity, and when those two come together, for me, that's sort of like unstoppable,
Yep.
right? Like you need, and then and you're just so excited to be working on everything that you do that way.
Totally. I mean, there is like a certain point, even like with kind of the quote that I did earlier, that like in 5 year span you will become an expert. It's like I bet most people during that 5 years like just ask themselves like, when am I gonna get there? When am I gonna be an expert? And like the moment that you kind of stop asking when am I gonna get there and start asking yourself like, how can I push this further? That is when you are truly passionate about what you're doing and like found
Hmm.
your the thing that draws you in creatively.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally accurate, and that's right on because, sometimes we can limit ourselves with the opportunities that are coming through because we have an idea of what we think our end goal is, or what
Hmm.
we think it's supposed to look like, and we stick with that and we ignore other opportunities that come through. But like I was saying, like for me, the biggest opportunities and most exciting opportunities have never been the things that I thought it was going to be, right? It's always been something where I was like, oh, like that's the thing you're interested in. Like, all right, we can let me explore that more. And more so now I'm aware of this because I do so much work with clients about trying to take these kind of like abstract ideas or emotions that a brand or an organization or a creative project, they might be trying to market a certain way or whatever, and I end up having these big conversations about like, well, let's get down to the essence of this, and like what ultimately, like what do you want people to feel and what do you want them to remember when they walk away from this. But it starts with them having a better understanding of themselves and what they want, right? And a lot of times, sometimes, or early on, a lot of times they're listing these kind of like external goals that can be checked off on a checklist instead of getting into the more abstract, which is where I think creative folks can come in and really help companies. Is like, well, get at like the core of what's driving that. It
Hmm.
isn't like, because I think anyone who's working hard and has committed themselves to a career has some sort of intrinsic motivation, but they might not be able to identify exactly what that intrinsic motivation is, and they'll just default to like external metrics. So they're like, well, we want our social media to go to 1,000 views every time we post a video, whatever it is, right? Um, and that's actually not helpful at all. What's more appropriate is that you're connecting to the right audience and that you're true to your own voice, whether that's your personal voice or your company's voice or your organization's voice. That's the stuff I think that matters. And I have found, I think I used to hear people say this when I was making art early on, and I was like, I want to believe that that's true, but there's no, it's scary, right? To like commit to be like, I'm just going to do my own thing and hope people like it. It's not as simple as that, right? I think it's about recognizing patterns in different industries and different communities, recognizing the patterns, understanding the systems, being objective with where you fit into that space and what you can offer and who you can learn from.
Hmm.
And I think for me, like the beginner's mind is super important to constantly put your place for me to stay super interested in the work. I think I always want to be learning something either about my process or about some larger idea or concept or a technical piece. So Decentraland right now, coming in after I did this metaverse, like this international residency with an organization called the Mud Foundation, and they had this really cool like online studio program where a couple international artists were pulled in to work for a month and put together a show, and it had to be like this immersive VR experience thing. And I absolutely loved it and fell in love with it. But what I didn't like was that the work just lived as its own piece that people could visit at any time, and that was cool. But there was no real community there. So for me with Decentraland, actually the biggest thing that is sort of I wouldn't say it's a learning curve, but the thing that I've been learning the most about is like how online communities form and support one another, right? Because I think you guys and this whole crew and the tangential crews that overlap do such an amazing job of defaulting to collaborating instead of competition. And unfortunately, in so many situations as artists and creatives and builders and whatever, we're forced to compete with one another because we're all going after the same opportunities, right?
Yep.
And in this world, what's been surprisingly like refreshing is just how collaborative and supportive folks are, and also like how they're legitimately psyched. Like, of course we all want to like get an opportunity that comes out, but people will pull others in, and say like, hey, why don't you be part of this with me? Like, I'm the one that happened to get it this time, but maybe next time someone else will get it, and they'll pull me in, and I'll pull you in this time, whatever. So anyway, that's for me has been huge, and I don't think I would have known that when I was younger, right? Like, just putting in the time is crucial, but it actually has to do with like getting in and understanding the community and the systems and like where you kind of sit in there and where you can learn. That for me is the big thing with any project that I'm working on.
Yeah, and I have to, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give my Decentraland family some flowers here because it's, this community does do a good job at, being open with each other and wanting to empower each other, as we grow, as we continue to trailblaze in this digital setting.
Yes.
Like the one thing that kind of like personally keeps me going in this space is it's another quote. It's like the most important work that you can do is the work that you do for others. In other terms, like just collaborating with others. If anyone needs any help, just being there and doing as much as you can with with the time you have, and that's how we all grow together. Yeah, like Decentraland has kind of become like a community, but like with multiple layers and multiple communities added on top of it. Like we have like there's the Decentraland community, then we have CBD, we have Baby Dolls, we have Face Moon, and Meta One Designs, and each one of those communities, like it's like we all work together, we all know each other, and those different communities have different individuals that find them and join their communities, in turn, building everything together at
Yes.
once. So yeah, that's it is a breath of fresh air to see this type of community like in a digital space, because definitely I've looked into many different communities, and they're not like this.
No, I also think it serves, from what I've seen, right? Like everyone's going to be different, have their own take and their own bias from their own experiences or whatever. But I've seen that, like for me, it happens to be like the niche that I'm super curious and interested in, right? Like, and I didn't even really, before I'd explored Decentraland just as like a dude in the world, like from early days, right? Just getting in there and kind of walking around and not knowing what to do. And for me, like I'm from Baltimore, Maryland on the East Coast, and I think Baltimore is similar to Decentraland in some ways, not because of the wire like people think it is, but because it's like all of that in Baltimore, if there's something happening, you kind of need to like know someone to go do that thing. It's like a lot of stuff that happens that's really really cool, but you can't just like get around super easily to all these different neighborhoods. You kind of like pick a neighborhood, you might go out there and go see a band or go see an art show or whatever, but it's usually like word of mouth about these events that happen.
Hmm.
And what's been really cool about this was like once I started, and really I have to give a shout out to Bay Backner for kind of helped me out with this. Like we were talking back and forth via email, I don't know, over the last year or so with a couple different things, different opportunities that were coming up. And I was just asking, she had written a piece that came out recently, and I read through it. And it was all about like online communities and how these creative communities, there are artists that are like flocking to the metaverse because there's really interesting stuff happening in there, more so than if you had like a physical studio and the community that you might have within that warehouse studio or whatever. And I asked her, I was like, yeah, this is like rad. I've actually found that it's like hard to find the community, right? And so what I have found was that like she pointed me to a couple different spots, right? And that's part of how like the whip meetup and all that. And then by just meeting people through that and getting connected to the right sort of, just like the right algorithm on X and that kind of stuff, it all of a sudden opened up this whole new world for me, right? And once I was in there, I was like, man, this community is amazing. It's like so supportive and just so cool how multifaceted it is, because it isn't just like one thing. It isn't like everyone only makes wearables or everyone only makes these sort of architectural builds, or it's actually like a true community in that you lean on each other, and I'll say we like lean on each other to support each other's projects or different things. And for me, like that was huge, because I actually think there's a lot of artists who are working with digital media or VR or immersive stuff or UX, whatever it is, who like the gallery system doesn't really work for the physical gallery system, might not really work, right? Like we're constantly porting these like digital experiences onto a monitor that gets mounted on a white wall in, and some, it might be in like a window or something. We're like, oh, this is cool. Like people are seeing it. But like the apparatus itself is jacked up there because you have to actually experience it online or through whatever it is, like through a VR headset or through your desktop, whatever. And I think to be kind of like living the art, it all becomes this big sort of like this really kind of, in a way, I think of it almost as like performance art, right? Like we get to see the evolution of all these artistic processes, and we get to see work that is constantly changing and people who are sharing updates, and I'm thinking of, I was on X and I was commenting with one of the Metacrew folks. I was talking to Mean Green Doge and
Nice.
Toxic and just looking at like the sponge project with like jumping into a sponge bath that's literally sponges, like that is like on a kind of nerdy level. I was like, oh my god, how'd you get the physics working in it? Like that was just, it's such a niche specific question or thing to be excited about, and it doesn't exist in the real world, so you have to find that right community. And of all the things that I've explored, Decentraland by far is the one that actually feels much more of an extension of the creative process from the real world, and they're taking advantage of the medium of Decentraland, right? Like I think of it much more as a tool for creating, and the SDK is incredible. Like I just think all of that stuff is what gives Decentraland a future beyond just like decentralized finance.
Yep. Yep. I'm really happy to kind of hear that, even that feedback that you just gave, like the pertaining to the SDK and kind of Decentraland actually being an extension, like because like like you mentioned earlier, you got the opportunity to make something for the Metaverse Art Week that we just recently had. I think like a week and a half ago, and you as a newer creator coming in and figuring things out and actually putting stuff together. you know, the feedback definitely goes a long way. By any chance, do you remember the coordinates to the build so that we could do a little
Yeah.
tour and walk around and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's 5353.
Alrighty, 53, comma 53. I'm gonna jump over there. Anyone that would like to jump in with, you're more
I'm
than
gonna jump in world right now too, and if my mic cuts out, I'll just relog in.
Yep, sounds good. Or if you want, I could stream my visuals to Discord, and then
Oh, cool.
you could
Oh,
like
that
follow.
yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
If that works, let me see if the in world works, so I can walk around a bit. But if it doesn't, streaming to Discord would be awesome.
Yep. Yep. I'll just have that ready for you.
Oh yeah, I see you there. Cool. All right, let me see if I can get in.
Yeah. Do your thing.
Okay. I'm turning my audio down. Bang.
Yep. Yep.
All right, cool. I can still hear you. Great. Okay, the first time that was not working. Now it is.
Oh, we have Tank Poco up top.
Let's go.
I see Tank Poco. She must have had a stream and then like closed down and froze on like that.
Yeah. I got one of. I realized I was in there and I had those all muted, and then a couple of the monitors still have the link hooked up to it. And I was like, oh, we've got events streaming to this space. That I need to actually get in and just like turn them off, so I'm not stealing people's events.
Oh, I think it's fine. If anything, it might
Yeah,
might even create like more eyes, like, you know, someone
totally
just
true.
randomly
Yeah,
walking by and be like, "Oh crap, whose Twitch is this?" or whatever.
no doubt, no doubt. It might pull them into the other space too. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm in here. That's working. All right. Yeah. So oh, a big thing in here like is the art that a bunch of, you know, we had an open call to have, and I just put it out on X to see who would actually, you know, be interested in submitting and that kind of stuff. And I reached out to a couple NFT folks or whatever on a bunch of different chains to see if they wanted to have their work set up in Decentraland. And, you know, a lot of these folks like knew about Decentraland and knew what it was, but I was kind of shocked at like the divide, right? Where these people that are working on, they're using this blockchain structure to make their art, but they were really just exploring this kind of like 2D creation space, and they really were excited to be in a 3D space, and I think again we're looking for an excuse to get in and explore, and they were so eager to do it. And I was just like floored by
Really?
the artists. Yeah, like the artists who showed up and actually wanted to do this stuff for like, especially like, I mean, some are like pretty heavy hitters, and I was really psyched about that. Like to have people who, again, were curious about just figuring out like how do we show digital art in a digital space, right? And so for me, what was cool about this build was actually just getting in. I'm up top now by the cubes.
Oh, okay.
But not that you need to follow me, but I'm just looking out over the world. But I think like it's something that's interesting with all of these different sort of like sub scenes within Web3 creation is that there's always like competition, or like, we know there's everything is changing, so people will be like, oh no, I'm a Tezos person, or oh, I'm a Zora person, or I'm a whatever. And now you see more and more who are like, as cross-chain gets a little bit easier, you see more and more people who are really trying to be involved in as much sort of Web3 creation as they can be, and they're looking for spaces in 3D environments to show their work. Because as much as like people collect NFTs, and like I collect tons of NFTs and love it, and for me, I have no like, if there's an investment opportunity that pans out, like great, but for me it's always about, I think this is dope, I want to support this artist, and I want to look at it on my phone now and then, you know. But until we have a better way of really Like, of course, you can get screens, and even like Samsung has it built in and stuff now, where you can have little like slideshows and screensavers of NFTs you've collected. Um, we're still not there yet in a way that like there's just incredible 2D and like sort of, I'll say like flat 3D work, right? Like videos of 3D work that are out there that should be seen and could be hanging in people's houses, but there isn't like a standard there yet where you can say like, oh, I'm going to flip through all these different, at least not an affordable one, or I'm going to flip through all these different blockchains to show like all the art that I've collected or whatever, right? So I'm really interested, and it seems like there are a lot of the artists that are in this show here whose tags I have to put back up so everyone can like link out to their work. But the artists in here I think are eager to find a space like that where people can experience the work beyond their sort of like X feed or Warpcast or just like scrolling on their mobile phone and going into their wallet, because half the wallets like end up not showing the thumbnail, and like it's really fragmented right now. And I think that's just something as an early adopter of a technology, that is going to happen. But I am really curious to see how spaces like Decentraland and then all this amazing blockchain art that's being created, how we can like combine those and in a meaningful way. Like for me personally, something I tried to do with this and will definitely be continuing to try in future builds is, how do you create a space that's like worth going to whether you want to see the art or not? So a lot of what we have right now are is it Moonface? Is that the one? That's the gallery or whatever that I just saw. I was like, whoa, this is rad. Like there's cool stuff happening. There's events, there's art, there's like that kind of stuff is where I see the future of this going, where it's not about creating a simulation of a physical gallery space in the metaverse. It's much more about pulling in what you can do in the metaverse that you can't do in the real world, right? And it needs to be grounded in something familiar, which I think a lot of Decentraland stuff is, even based on just like the fact that you walk around. To me, that's huge, because you can, like, if you're Derek or whatever flying everywhere, like that's always the best. Like I think if you've got a smart wearable or whatever and you're like up in the air, that's rad and cool. But I like that the metaverse, for lack of a better term, the sort of world that Decentraland is currently functioning as, feels like a tangential universe from our current universe, right? Like our current physics of gravity and all that actually exist in this world, but there's so many things that cannot exist in our real world. I think that's the perfect balance, because people get disoriented and when you move into a space where all of a sudden you've divorced all real world physics and you've divorced all real world sort of like context. People have a hard time knowing how to navigate and what to look at. So, I'm really, me personally, that if I were to get into like a really specific space that I'm kind of watching and curious about, it would definitely be how do we integrate art and experiential design, which is what I would kind of think of as for Decentraland. How do we get those together and make really interesting stuff? Like, and there's so many cool things. Like, obviously people are doing this with wearables and they're doing it with builds, and there's so many things that I haven't even explored that people are already doing. That's really cool. I'm by no means like a pioneer on this thing, but I think just that question of how do we do this, the more people that are exploring that, I think the more interesting more like the experiences that are going to be generated are going to be phenomenal. And it's going to pull new people into the space, to both spaces. It's going to take Decentraland play people. It's going to connect them with some like maybe even off-chain artists and stuff who are making cool stuff. And then we can have more of this collaborative thing that within Decentraland we already have,
Totally, 100%. And like, even to kind of add on, or even kind of like to share my point of view of like what Decentraland can offer artists, creatives coming in, is basically like there are many different platforms virtual platforms, especially like nowadays, like it seems like every week there's a new platform that's just out, and
Yeah, yeah,
I like to kind of um, to artists, I like to display Decentraland as like a place that they can build and like kind of put their digital footprint into, and then
yeah.
like like build your experience, build like and also like think outside the box because in Decentraland like you it's not like a traditional gallery. Like you can walk in, it's a building, you can make the building the actual art. And
Yes.
then within the art, there is more art. And you're kind of
Yeah.
in a paradox.
No, I think you're exactly right in that, and I think that's what makes Decentraland stand apart from others is that the thing itself is art, right? Like I think every single person in here, whether you're making wearables, whether you're just part of the community, and you're here for like the events and the DJs and whatever, like every single person in here is ultimately a UX designer, right? It's all user experience, it's all immersive experience stuff, and that is, there's no doubt that that's like, I don't want to say that's the future of art. Like all art is going to be that, but I think more and more, like the meta levels that people are comfortable with accessing, even on like a very basic public level, is like we're actually incredibly sophisticated that in understanding like layers of reality. Which I'd say if we were to go 20 years back when I was graduating college and stuff, like first working as an artist professionally, that wasn't even really something people were super familiar with. There are artists who were like dealing with this idea of like reality and perception of reality and whatever, but now you have these amazing technologies that are allowing this to happen where just by being there you're part of the art, right? And so lately I've been thinking, like just in my own head and talking to some friends about it and stuff, is like more and more I just keep thinking of everything that I do personally, and I think what a lot of artists do is like it's all performance art, right? I think Decentraland is a huge example of that, right? Like the fact that like I would say I have friends in Decentraland, I have no idea what their real name is, what they look like, whatever, right? Like, and I actually like think that's rad and totally appropriate, and I think is really just an extension of some sort of performance art. And for me, that's a fascinating thing, is to figure out how do we have, like, as an artist today, you need to be able to market your own shit on social media. You need to be able to make the work. First of all, you need to understand the systems. You need to be your own like support system sometimes, to be like, hey, this piece is good. It doesn't matter that no one minted it. Like there's all this stuff that as an artist we have to do, and more and more I know in my personal practice, making that process and all of those things that we do as artists and creatives, making that part of the art itself, is really becoming a core part of what I do and what I'm interested and curious in exploring. Is like, where does it actually become art? When is it just like an artifact of an exploration, and when does it become an actual piece of art? And I'd say now that like so much art that we look at is generative, in the sense of not just like coding and creative coding. Of course there's that, but like it's just a constant evolution of a project that is ongoing, like the Dollhouse meetups and all that, like all the parties and all that stuff. And these are all art projects that are that don't work without an audience, right? And without a community. And then all of a sudden everybody is part of that art piece, and there isn't one specific person who's like, I'm the artist here. It's very much about like facilitating an environment within which creative activity and connection can happen, right?
Yeah, 100%. Man, I'm very much enjoying this conversation. So like getting into the build, could you talk about a little bit of the inspiration behind the build, as well as like even the wearable that we're both currently
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
displaying here.
Yeah, no, thank you for rocking it. Yeah, I think the oh, and their Toxic Scott there's on right there. Boom. All right. So, yeah, I think yeah, for me with every project, as I keep saying, like process is super important. And I had this professor years ago. When I was in college, I studied abroad in Australia, and I had this professor at the College of Fine Arts in Sydney. And I don't think it's important that I say where it's from. I just think it's cool that it was in Australia, so I said it. But anyway, I had this professor there, and I think part of why I note that like it was on the other side of the world was because I feel so grateful for this one little like nugget of knowledge that I've kept with me. But it was an installation course, and it was a physical installation course, and so we would make. We'd have to pick different themes and then try and create an experience within a limited space, and very much like Mesh Fair, right? Where like, here's your cube and you do this, except in a real world. And so, so the thing he said whenever we were going through, because so many of us were really conceptual with the work that we were doing, and it was easy to like float away from what the original idea was. And he said, it's not important to stick with the original idea, but you have to come back to the medium and use whatever the medium is, and actually more specifically the material that you're using to build this piece. Like, always come back to the material. So any idea you have, run it back through, use the material as the anchor. And for me, that's really stuck with me for every project I work on, is like, what is my anchor going to be, so I don't just float off and create a bunch of projects that are never finished, right? Like that's definitely something I'm guilty of, right? And I think with when I know there's a deadline or whatever, a huge helpful tool is to just create that anchor. So for me, and actually I don't mean this to be like a pun, but the anchor was these naval ships from World War I, which feels strange, but the reason it became an inspiration was because a lot of the work I've been doing is questioning perception and reality and our understanding of that. And so I started looking at examples of where we've seen that in history. And in World War I, we have a lot of naval vessels, especially in England and the States, where they were painted with dazzle camouflage, which is this black and white. It was a number of different colors, actually, but the major examples of it that you'll see are these black and white, really graphic paintings on the side of graphic, and like literally graphic, not like nudity, but these black and white like line paintings where there'll be a huge pattern that's going one way with an angle, and then all of a sudden it slams into another angle of black and white lines going another way. And the idea behind it was that you couldn't tell where the points of the ship were, so that if you were under attack or if someone was looking through a periscope, they couldn't tell if the boat was coming, if the ship was coming towards them or moving away from them, or if it was sideways. And some of these examples, like if you Google dazzle camouflage, I mean, it's just beautiful. Like there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I just want to put a giant boat in the middle of a space and like let that be the art. And it's just a really cool example of a primitive technology, right? Like oil paint or whatever it was being used on the side of this thing. And you're still able to create this illusion, and you're able to force people to question their perception. And for me, that's something that is super relevant in any kind of virtual world, right? Where you're questioning reality. This very much feels like a very real human connection, but you could argue like, no, that's 2 pixels on a screen and there's a voice attached to them, right? And so I think that for me became the anchor, right? Was like, okay, dazzle camouflage is going to be the anchor for this. Now, how do I actually kind of create this illusion with a large build in Decentraland? And so as I got into the SDK and was playing in Blender and different stuff, I started playing with reflections. And something I love about Decentraland, again, is like this natural environment that we're a part of, where we actually can understand that there's clouds and stars and the sky and sun. And that for me, I wanted to just highlight that, right? Bring it back to the material itself. So in this case, the material, the sort of inspiration was the Dazzle camouflage, and then the material was Decentraland. And how could I actually anchor all of my work and everything that I was doing in this build in Decentraland, and not necessarily comment on it, but call attention to like these really transcendent experiences that can happen with pixels on a screen in an immersive virtual meta space, you know? And I think for me, that was really like at the core of where this came from. And then it was just experimenting with reflections and light. The shapes were inspired, like the actual black and white pattern is a Dazzle sort of pattern that I put together. But the actual like cutouts in the build, I was just trying to think, like they're inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, and I was trying to think of these like American architects who were working where material was really, really important. And so the fact that there's like arguably isn't a material that is used in this build, right? It's all just pixels. I wanted to ground it in some kind of like something that felt real, but we wouldn't see it in the real world. So I kind of took some of these patterns that Frank Lloyd Wright used to use at like the top of his builds and stuff, and just kind of created these patterns that mirrored the Dazzle a little bit. What's up, Faceman? I mean, Faceman's hanging out in the space. So yeah. Anyway, that's it. Like I could go on and on with all of these questions. So anytime you need to interrupt me, please do. But I get super psyched about all this and the fact that there's a community that's, you know, interested in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's so yeah, you were mentioning like the reflections and stuff, and as you were like talking about it, I like instantly started looking at the walls, and I'm like, dude, these are reflections. I thought it was like what was going through, and then through the slits you can kind of like look through the build. That is sick. And in all honesty, I enjoyed listening to kind of like your process of like you know, you learning about your anchor as an artist, and and kind of like how you applied it to your Decentraland build here for Art Week. And so how did the opportunity to build to, you know, how did this opportunity come to you?
Yeah. No, this is I mean, this is like so cool. Like so as I was walking around, it's so funny. I have a picture. I look back. The very first picture I ever took in Decentraland with like my camera function or whatever. If I go into my camera roll, it's the very first picture is of the pavilion that was used, I guess, last year for the Metaverse Art Week.
Okay.
And I took a picture because I was like, whoa, what is this about, right? Like, because it was, again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm like literally just wandering around in the world to try and find, like, I knew I could go to events and that kind of stuff, but honestly, like, as someone who hasn't been in World before, and I have friends who are like this too, I'm like, oh, meet up with me, and here they're like, oh, but I don't know anyone there. I'm like, yeah, it's not really like that, dude. Like, you can just roll up. Like, it'll be okay. And so for me, I was like, well, I'm not going to roll up on an event right now while I'm trying to, like, figure out the space. And so I was just wandering around trying to find, like, things that I thought were interesting. And to be honest, I actually sometimes purposefully, I don't avoid the events because I know the events are going to be cool. I know they're already established. I know there's a community connected to events if those events are happening. But I wanted to just go around and see, like, I wanted to see some bad builds, right? Or, you know, quote in quotes. I wanted to see some stuff that wasn't like fully realized. I want to see, like, what are people doing in this space that is interesting or not, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, getting in there, I'm walking around and I see Metaverse Art Week. I was like, yo, is this happening like right now? Like, what is this, dude? So I rolled up to it and snapped a picture because there was like no one there, right? I was like, well, I don't understand this. Like, why is there no one here? And this is amazing. But I realized, like, it's very event oriented, right? And so I went through and like explored a bunch of cubes and stuff. And so I knew I knew that this thing existed. But from that point forward, I was like, I got to figure this out because
Mhm.
this is the kind of thing I want to be doing. So that was where I explored like Mesh Fair, one other website, started checking out some artists and following some artists on X and that kind of thing. Um, Somehow I got in touch with Bay through that. I think I got, I think the first time I actually talked to Bay was through, I had just finished this residency and I submitted, for something in Decentraland that was like, it wasn't a fully realized like application, but I submitted to one event. I thought it was the music event. So like the music festival that was happening, right? I kind of like I quickly got something together and put it in there and Bay got back. I was like, hey, like we're not choosing you on this one, but I think you're making some interesting stuff. You should definitely like continue to apply to these events. I then like the wellness one came up and I couldn't get the stuff together for that one because I was just working on client work and other stuff. And so then finally I knew like, okay, the big one that I've been really hoping to be a part of is the art, like this art week action. And so with the art week, yes, dude, I like your the arm, the arm around is so nice. I actually love it.
It's my favorite
I,
emote.
it's so good, so subtle and so human. You know.
It's my boy Match.
That's right. I love it. So I snapped this shot anyway at Metaverse, and then like a year later, it comes up. It's like, yo, this is happening. This is cool, and I applied, and I was hoping to get one of the cubes. So I applied to like the cube thing, and then the Mesh Fair like online application, and then the actual like Decentraland larger build application. And for me, I felt like, okay, I could do something interesting in one of those cubes. I think I felt that's where my like curiosity and confidence kind of like lined up, where I was like, I think I could handle that, right? But then I was like legitimately shocked, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to do this like one of these big
Do you want a
builds?"
four by four?
I was like, yeah, I was like,
Or be 2 by 2?
absolutely, like let's do this, man. Like that sounds incredible. So that was so cool because my context for like what I was applying for shifted once I got this, and I was like, oh, I got to think of this differently because I was thinking of a tight space where I could jam things in and try to, yeah. And so then the opposite happened where I was like, oh, now I have this huge space that I need to make it feel not too huge, right? And that was kind of cool, but I think the nature of the work with the reflections and that kind of stuff, it made a lot of sense for it to be a larger space because you can, like on the outside, I'm gonna walk away from you. I'm not walking away from you hugging me. But here, like where I spray painted "We Love Baltimore" on the side of it. But when I go out to the outside of this, because it's such a large thing, you can really capture the beauty of like the sky and just the programming that has gone into making this organic, evolving thing. And that I kind of understand, I think, then why this work might benefit from being large scale. So I don't know how people make the decisions or what they look at and all that kind of stuff, but I was grateful for the opportunity and then just dove in, like obsessively, like just fully immersed myself in this and had a lot of ideas that I realized later at going through the process, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do everything that I want to do here.
It's funny because like when you finally get that opportunity, just the ideas flow and flow and flow,
Oh yeah,
and then you kind of start to realize like, ooh, I might need a little more time here.
yeah, yeah. And I think that was for me, like working up to the last minute, and like huge shout out to my wife. And we have three daughters, 10, 7, and 3, and this took so much time in a good way. Like we knew it, like, and she's an associate head of like a lower school, elementary school. Like there are times where she's super busy and I'll take on the sort of family vibe stuff, and then and we'll balance it out that way. But like legitimately, I couldn't have achieved what I was able to achieve. And even this, when I look at it, I'm like, ooh, there's like, just like any project, I'm like, man, I'd like to change that and that and that. But it was just like working late, trying to keep doing the project work and all that. But for me, I'm always looking for a healthy balance with this. Was like, if I'm in a project, I'd like to immerse myself in it, like get to know the community, figure out what you can do with the programming, or and try to do stuff that I couldn't do somewhere else, right? And so that was a huge part of this. But the big thing that I found that was actually like people responded to the most, and what I thought was the most interesting were, again, these like human touches, which is why we put this build up. And then on that, like, I don't know, during Art Week on the Wednesday or the Tuesday or something, Baltimore has this like really, really terrible experience with our a giant bridge collapsing.
Yep.
And it became like, international news or whatever. I was like, this is interesting. Like, I'm from Baltimore. I'm not gonna act like I can do anything to really help this situation, but I felt some need to like express something. And so, kind of going along with the performance art tip, I like this idea of like, what if I set this up as if like the Decentraland community knew I was from Baltimore, and a couple people came in and did like, they're like, the giant spray paint stuff with the huge. Sometimes they use like chemical sprayers for lawns or whatever, and you just put paint in it, and you do these like really messy, drippy, like words or text on a wall. And I was like, wouldn't that be kind of a cool sentiment to think that like, here are these people who are like, hey, it was in a way, it was my way of showing like, even though I obviously did it, like I was the one in control of the build and that kind of stuff, I went in and did this, but wanted to sort of like, I knew that this community, it wasn't about like, hey, let's get behind Baltimore. I knew that they would sort of understand that concept, like, yeah, on a meta level, but also because it's like a very human thing. And I think more so than, like I keep saying, more so than other spaces, Decentraland at its core is about human connection and like supporting other humans and getting to know other humans. And by putting this up there and making it, everything else in the build looks very robot, or like it could have been manufactured in some factory, right? But this part is like, well, here's where the humans came in
aspect.
Actually, like, yeah, right. And so I started really getting, I was like, oh, this adds a whole new layer. Like, I love the fact that this could change over time. So I actually, throughout the week, I didn't make it so it was like obvious, but I just started moving stuff around. Like there's an island and the cubes and stuff. I just started like, I'd deploy a new build every like, sometimes like 3 or 4 times a day, but it was mainly because I was just like curious, and so I would do it anyway. But like all of that like wouldn't have happened, and I don't think the build would have been as, I've been so humbled by like the response to it, but like it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the fact that there was already like a human community energy in the space, and then I was able to kind of like tap into that a little bit within this really rigid space, right? So to sort of wrap that thought up, you like what I loved about it, which was not planned at all, was that we just went from like me having a concept about like questioning reality and questioning your perception and what you can actually see and what's there, what's a reflection, what am I actually looking through, and then like at the end of it, it ultimately ends up with this like really crude spray paint of like, no, this is just a wall that we spray painted on, and like to me that was really cool. It added this like narrative element to it that wasn't there in this kind of cold space that people ultimately made warm.
Exactly. Wow. I mean, that's awesome, and I have to even thank you for like putting this much thought into an opportunity that you got in just at the time what was a random digital world. Like I'm very happy that you took that time to make it special in any way that you can, and it really does make a difference speaking to the creator of the build and learning this straight from you.
Yeah.
This is an awesome build that you made for us for Metaverse Fashion, or not fashion, Metaverse Art Week, and yeah, I hope that like you get even more opportunities in the years to come.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for me, I'm fully like I just feel like whether I've got opportunities or not, I'm just feel like I'm embedded here, and I see it as like a core part of my process, at least now, to be like, oh, all the ideas I have actually only really work in this space right now. So, no, definitely, I appreciate you saying that.
And also, I know that at the beginning of the when like we first jumped over to the build, you were talking about the different paintings and artwork that was on the walls.
Yeah,
You know, kind of mentioning that it's from different artists throughout different chains, and all were excited to be featured in on Decentraland. Like, I see that as an opportunity of potentially even, you know, bringing creators in like that
oh yeah.
that is the initial spark of curiosity.
No doubt, no doubt. And I think Decentraland's so good, like even online, like, they'll repost people's work or whatever it is. And I think like for artists, that's huge because you look at and you're like, oh, they have 600,000 followers on like the main foundation
Hmm.
account or whatever. And then you actually have like, that's one thing to have a bunch of followers, but then to have a bunch of communities that are active within there who are willing to support you and you get to know them. Like, yeah, I actually think there's huge opportunity here for a bunch of artists to start moving into this space and built with like really basic knowledge. They can get into VS Code and like build some cool stuff, or just even if they just want to use their work as textures on wearables or whatever. Like
Hmm.
there's so many opportunities that could happen, and
Hmm.
and that's something that for me personally I'd be like super curious to explore
Yep.
and see how we can help to bridge that gap.
I even like with whatever experience you may have also gained through Art Week in making this experience, I feel like it's also an opportunity for even yourself to build that following, because like, you know, an artist coming into this space, there is some coding involved, there is some, you know,
Hmm.
like a lot of the times artists come in like, you know, as the visual
Yeah,
directors, and
yeah,
they need that coder, they need that person to help them. So in a way, like there's definitely plenty of opportunity. And just like kind of like how I did for you a few weeks back, like introducing you to different individuals that
yeah.
that stuff in the space, it's like that can also keep moving forward, you know.
Totally. That was huge too. Like they're like, if I had to give shout outs to folks, there's I love I'd actually listened in before on some replays and stuff of the like the stream that you do with the community meetup things.
Hmm.
And like, and I was like, oh, there's some interesting conversations here. And so then the one time, once I was mid build and doing some stuff, I was listening in. I was like, I'm gonna see if I can chime in here. Like I felt at that point, I felt like I had a decent grounding in what people were talking about, and the conversation was focused around like, what do we call Web3 stuff and all that. And I was just like so excited that people have been facilitating environments for those discussions to happen, right? And I was like, I want to be involved and at the very and add to the conversation, not in a selfish way, but just to be like, this should have like people should be engaging in this. Like this is really interesting stuff. There was like no judgment on what people were saying. There might have been people like are like, I don't think it's that. I think it's this. But
Hmm.
no, you do an amazing job just giving people a voice and giving time. Like even this, like I get to ramble on and think out loud, for an hour and a half. Like that's phenomenal. A lot of times it's all you get is like a blurb under a social media post, right? So
Quick, give me your one
I
minute
think
shill. That's all you get. We'll leave
that's
after.
right. Exactly. So I think like that's really cool, and the fact that you have been able to find an audience who's willing to engage in that level of stuff and not expect like a polished presentation of people's thoughts or whatever. Like huge shout out to you for like being willing to even let me like turning my mic on and that thing, and then and also I have to thank Tang for sure. Like Tang, he's like when I got in, like part of doing this was that you had to have an event in your space. And
Hmm.
so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I thought of a couple like panel discussions with artists and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, but dude, like they don't have a community in here. And as I was exploring all these different events and stuff, like the Dollhouse events were just awesome. Like they were so much fun. and my kids would like come
Top tier.
hang out with me. We'd like shield
Top
their
tier.
eyes from time to time.
Top
But
tier events, yes.
yeah, but it was like I got it. Like I fully got it on an artistic creative level. And I really really thought like legitimately the DJs, right? Like with Henny and with Gucci Toe. I was like this is so good. Like there's just good artists making cool work. They're making wearables and it felt to me like LA back in the day with Ed Ruscha and that crew where it's like, you know, and I'm not trying to like blow smoke, but like I was like, oh, these are actually cutting edge artists making interesting creative work and they're actually living in this space and they've created a community for themselves. To me that was huge. And so to have Tang be like totally down to host an event in as the after party and that kind of stuff for Art Week was huge. And but yeah, first day showing up there, I walked away with some wearables and stuff that shoots. And it's like that's so chill because now I've been in it like you know I haven't been in it, embedded in a community for that long, but enough to know like when a new person rolls up, I like shoot them a sweater or whatever, and they're like, oh, cool, you know, like you get a little welcoming gift if there's someone hanging out and you see they're wearing all the defaults. You're like, oh, they're probably new, you know. So anyway, huge shout out to you guys and just so much gratitude for you know the whole community being welcoming and I'm just so excited to continue to build and create and get to know people.
And I'm excited to, you know, even to have the opportunity to sit here and watch your creations come as they're being made.
Thank you.
And like definitely you made a comment about like, you know, whenever you were thinking about what kind of event you should host here on like for Art Week, and you were thinking about some panels and stuff like that. Like I and kind of like what stopped you was the you know, the artists may not have a active community here on Decentraland. I honestly see that it's in itself as an opportunity, one, to empower the artist, you know, by introducing them to a whole new community that they've never like engaged with, and then two, like as you know, as the artist meets our communities and then his community starts to intertwine with ours, that just, you know, for me
Yeah.
it's like if you even have just one person logging into Decentraland from that, like for me it's enough. Like
Yes. Well, and I'll say this like on that point, and like so upstairs on the second floor, there's like a giant helmet, and it's by this artist Retro Manny, and he has this amazing, you know, for people who don't know him, follow him on Instagram. It's just retro_Manny, Manni. I can't. I think for me, I think he's probably the most interesting artist right now in terms of how he's creating these narratives. So it's like kind of this comic book slash video game character where you can like download NFTs of this dude's like adventures as videos, and then he has this like I don't even understand the coin. Like this is someone who I talk to and stuff, and I don't even understand how like robust this thing is. But he has this like coin system on there where it's kind of like a top scorer thing. But anyway, I had him in the space. He's based in England, and I had him in the he had never been in Decentraland, and I was like, yo, I got your. Could you give me your helmet instead of just like one of your videos? Could you give me the actual like GLB file so I could drop your helmet in there? I just think that would be so cool as a sculpture. And he was like, oh yeah, for sure. He was up for it. And so he came to visit, and then he was so into it. This is like while I was building. It wasn't even up yet. He does his own stream, like Twitch thing and X thing. And he had people in this space being like, you guys got to come in here and like look at this stuff. Not my space specifically, but in terms of Decentraland. He's like, this is cool. And right for an artist like that who's already thinking about these kind of like layered narratives in different universes, this space would be amazing for it. So even he and I've been like, yo, do you have a wearable for Retro Manny? And he's like, no. I was like, we got to make that happen. And then he was like, yeah, actually that would be really cool. I was like, dude, yeah, we could like easily make that, we could make that helmet a helmet. Like you could wear it in the world. And he was like, oh my God, there's like an endless amount of opportunities. I was like, yeah, dude, like we could do a show because he has all the like old outfits as GLBs, and then he's got like interactive stuff. I was like, there's no reason we couldn't turn this space into like a retro Manny retrospective, you know? And he was like, that would be phenomenal. So I actually think it's stuff like that where artists, if you can pitch artists on not just like putting a 2D floating frame up, but actually creating an immersive experience related to their art, that is super intriguing, right? Like if you can pair them with like developers and artists that way, or group a team that can do that, like you can have these amazing shows in this space that you couldn't have in reality, right?
Yep, most definitely. And yeah, I would definitely love to meet him.
Yeah, no, I'll connect you guys on X or whatever. Great dude, like really just a good guy. Didn't know him before I started like doing the NFT thing and collecting stuff. And I just reached out and was like, I just love what you're doing. Like it's so cool. And then from there, this opportunity ended up coming up. I was like, hey, you want to throw some stuff in the show? He was into it, and then yeah, so I just can't wait. That's again like that wouldn't have happened without this opportunity, without just being involved in general. But I do think there's an interesting thing that can happen between like X and I guess Warpcast, and then like once that gets figured, people figure out what that is exactly, and then and then like Decentraland, like I think bridging those gaps, there's just like endless opportunities.
Yep, yep, definitely endless opportunities. Especially for like those creators in the space, the Web3 musician, the Web3 artist,
Hmm.
like those creators. It is a platform for them to be able to display their work or perform their art, like
Yeah.
and like yeah, not have like for example, not pay 50% of subscriber money to Twitch
Hmm.
or stuff like that.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Definitely. So I see that we've been going for about an hour and a half or so.
Yeah.
I guess this could be a good time to start winding down. Uh,
Yeah.
um, so I guess my first wind down question. You had mentioned that you started your own creative agency.
Hmm.
If anyone ever wanted to either be a part or hire, what is the best
Yeah.
way to contact?
Yeah, if all of my socials are always just Match Zimmerman, so it's just at Match Zimmerman on X or Instagram or whatever. You can go to matchzimmerman.com and see some of the stuff that we do. Admittedly, it's just like any creative's website. It's not updated as much as I would like it to be,
Work's never done,
but
Match.
yeah, but I think like in terms of reaching out, find me on any social at Match Zimmerman, and then my email is just mz at matchzimmerman.com. So reach out because yeah, as I've been in this space, there's been things where I'm like, ooh, that person knows how to do this kind of thing. And I've been thinking like, maybe if something comes through where I have a need for this, I'll reach out to them to kind of like add them to the team. Because ultimately, what happens is, um, I, it's branded as Match Zimmerman Creative Media Group, and I just kind of serve as the creative director. And there are plenty of projects where it's me executing all of it, right? Like if it's within my realm and I can do it and turn it around in time, then I'll do it. But there are bigger projects that come through, and on a project to project basis, we'll expand the team. Like right now, we're doing this. I'm doing this big podcast thing, and it's like a documentary podcast thing, and then I have a friend in New York who's doing a bunch of like just audio engineering stuff on it, and I'm doing a bunch of the editing and the projects change based on the need of the company. Instead of saying, here's the 6 people that work on our team, and now we need to find everybody a task, it's
Mhm.
just like,
You
kind of a
contract as you
community within
go.
itself. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So definitely reach out, and let me know if you'd be like down to work together, or yeah, if you have something that you need help with. The main sort of deal is like we'll help you tell your story through digital media, right? So that can be podcasts, that could be a video series, that might just be motion graphics like explainer videos. It could be a build in a metaverse, like all of that stuff. I think it's just really cool. Just trying to connect people with their audience, right? That's
Hmm.
always the goal. And it doesn't have to be a giant corporation. I don't, like, it can be just one person with an art project who's like, hey, I want to make some cool, graphics for this or whatever. So, yeah, that's the kind of, that's the gig. That's the way to reach out. Anything at Match Zimmerman, and MZ at matchzimmerman.com.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that is awesome. I enjoy your website. It's very, like, even though you said that the job's not
Yeah.
done, it's like easy to navigate. Independent work, client work, and then in the middle, that's like you.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, that's good to know because, yeah, and that came down to me being like, all right, I gotta have something here. Yeah, like, because just like anything, I was treating it like an art project. So I was like, ooh, this would look cool here, and this, and I was like, all right, I gotta actually give some information. Like,
Oh, and I
uh,
also see you have some of just kind of like your past work here.
oh yeah, oh, I see it up on the screen. Dope. Oh wow, dude, you have a very pro setup here. Look at you. This is very cool, man. Yeah. So that's a soundtrack I did on Spotify. If you
Right
search
here.
for Match Zimmerman, at the very top, it's for this a friend of mine, super awesome creative person, Courtney Romano. She did this web series called Kinsley Versus. So shout out to Courtney. Check that out on YouTube if you want. Kinsley Versus. Do a search for it. But I did the soundtrack for it, and I did all the score for it and stuff. And so, and then just some graphic work for it. And then some of these are just like explainer kind of videos, and all of this, like the goal is like they all complement, right? Like the stuff that I do for clients ultimately informs what I do in my creative work, and my creative work informs my client work, and more, those two are coming together. And that's the ultimate goal, right? Is like be helping people and staying true to your voice and being curious and learning,
I love it. I love it. And yeah, so before we close out, any final thoughts you would like to leave everyone with?
No, if I were to like list everybody that has helped me out so far in this space in a short amount of time and just been supportive by like grabbing a sweater or whatever it is, I like if I started listening, I definitely miss people. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and whether that was like one little tweet or multiple conversations back and forth or a Zoom call or whatever. Thanks to everybody, and the fact that people are still here hanging out is a credit to you, and the fact that in this community, like, and also like, I look around and whether you realize it or not, like I see some of these names, I'm like, oh snap, I love that person's work. Like I love that person. Like there's just so many cool. And then there's new people, and I'm looking at like, yo, cameraman show, that is a dope helmet. Like there's just so much cool stuff happening. So I just want to say thank you. That's all. That's thank you to you. Thank you to the community, and just thanks for this opportunity, and thanks for letting me ramble on and just kind of like chat about art.
Yep, this conversation has been a very good conversation. I've definitely enjoyed myself. And to anyone watching the screen right now, this is the wearable that was created by Match. It is currently free. So if anyone wants to pick one up in the marketplace, I'm gonna drop the link both in the Decentraland chat as well as like even on all streaming platforms. Just
Thank you.
so you can get and cameraman right here, he says hi.
Yeah, let's go.
uh, and yeah, so Match, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for being my
Thank you, dude.
guest. You were an awesome guest, and definitely looking forward to seeing what you make in the future and how we could collaborate and help each other out as like we
Definitely.
build this platform. And most of all, like with your Art Week build, thank you for making my home world beautiful.
Oh, that's so nice. Thanks so much. This honestly has been amazing. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And so, yeah, thank you everyone that has joined tonight's event, whether you've been watching on Twitch, Kick, YouTube, or on X. I really appreciate you. Thank you to all, let's see, 33 of you that are left on the Meta One Designs build. It has been a great pleasure to be able to host tonight's event for all of you. And yeah, just I guess stand by and we'll get RuPaul's Drag Race going here in just a moment. I hear this week is a good episode, so let's get to it.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, and yeah, so everyone just please stand by. I'm gonna just raid out on Twitch, close the YouTube stream, do all the little extra stuff, and we'll get started with this week's episode. Um, so yeah, take care, everyone. Uh,